It was close to midnight when the pounding started. Heavy, deliberate, not the kind of knock you ignore. I remember sitting by the fire in my cabin tucked deep into the mountain pines, the sort of place where silence is supposed to be the rule, not the exception. That night, though, silence didn't stand a chance. Tires crunched over the gravel outside, beams of flashlight swept across my windows, and above it all came this sharp voice barking orders. At first, I thought maybe a search. Party had wandered up the wrong road. But then I recognized the tone, that shrill mix of false authority and self-importance. It was Diane. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you probably know a Diane. Head of the association back in the valley, self-appointed queen of compliance. She'd hassled neighbors about mailbox paint colors, measured grass. With a ruler, left nasty notes taped to doors. For months she had been pestering me too, insisting my cabin somehow fell under her HOA's rules, even though my deed shows clear as day that my land sits 3 miles outside their jurisdiction. I had ignored her letters, her warnings, her threats. But now here she was on my porch, dragging actual police officers with her, like she had just declared war. "Open up," she yelled, her voice cracking through the night. "This property is in violation. You'll regret it if you don't comply." My pulse spiked. How had she even convinced the cops to come up here? Did they really think she had authority on my land? On the couch, my buddy Mark stirred, blinking in the firelight. He'd driven up for a weekend hunt, but now he looked more like he'd stumbled into a crime thriller. "What the hell's going on?" he whispered. "They're here," I muttered, "and they're not leaving." We crept to the frosted window. Outside, Diane stood at the front like a general with her troops, smug grin lit by flashlight beams, officers on either side looking more confused than commanding. She thought she had me cornered. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment, because after her last barrage of letters, I'd finally had enough. I cracked open the door, cold air rushing in, every flashlight locking onto dough. At once, Diane jabbed her finger like she'd been waiting to deliver this line. "There he is. This man refuses inspection. He's trespassing with an illegal structure, and I demand you remove him immediately." One of the officers frowned. "Ma'am, we were called here for a disturbance. This isn't just a disturbance." Diane cut him off, her voice pitching high. "I run the homeowners association. This land is under our rules. He's mocking the law." I stepped out slowly, boots crunching on frost, Mark right behind me with his arms folded. The kind of stance that says, "Go ahead, try me." "This cabin is on my deeded land," I said, keeping my voice steady but firm. "Your HOA stops miles south. You've been told this before." Her eyes narrowed, and with a theatrical flourish, she whipped out a folder stuffed with papers. "Not anymore. I have documentation." She shoved it at the officer like it was the Constitution itself. The cop flipped through them, and I instantly recognized the same computer-printed violations she'd been stuffing in my mailbox for months. Harassment dressed up as legal authority. Mark let out a low chuckle. "Lady, those are Word documents, not court orders." Diane flushed red. "You think I'd fabricate this? You have no idea how much authority I carry." The shorter officer shifted awkwardly. "Ma'am, without legal grounds we can't," and that's when it happened. From the tree line, boots crunched over the frozen ground. A figure stepped into the glow of the cabin light, tall, calm, presence so steady it stopped everyone cold. It was Sheriff Grant. I had invited him days earlier, sent him every letter Diane had pounded out, even recordings of her screaming at my gate. He told me if things escalated, he'd be there. And here he was, right on time. "Evening," he said evenly, nodding to the officers. "Didn't expect to find half my department up here." "What's going on?" Diane's face went pale. Then she forced a smile. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here. This man is in violation of HOA law. He's defying community order. Brought your deputies to enforce it." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Community order?" He held out his hand. "Let me see those papers." Reluctantly, she handed them over. He flipped through them slowly, his mouth tightening, not in amusement, but disbelief. He snapped the folder shut. "These aren't legal documents," he said flatly. They're copies of HOA bylaws, and your boundary stops 3 miles south of here. This cabin has never been under your jurisdiction. Her jaw dropped. That's not possible. I measured. You harassed, the sheriff cut in, and you dragged my deputies up here under false pretenses. The taller officer actually exhaled, relieved. The shorter one muttered, "Knew this felt off." Diane scrambled, her voice rising into panic. No, you don't understand. He's dangerous. If you don't shut him down, others will rebel too. It'll be chaos." Mark barked out a laugh. "Chaos? It's a cabin in the woods, not a coup." The sheriff turned to me, his tone calm but direct. "I've reviewed what you sent me. You're in the clear. But I need to ask, do you want to press charges for harassment?" The porch went silent. Diane's eyes darted wildly, her bravado crumbling. For the first time, she realized she wasn't holding the power anymore. I took a long breath. Part of me wanted to say yes, drag her through the courts the way she'd tried to drag me. But another part just wanted peace. "Sheriff," I said finally, "I could press charges. She's trespassed, harassed, wasted your deputy's time. But I don't want court battles. I just want her to stop." Diane snapped upright again, desperate. "Stop? You think I'll walk away after everything I've built? This isn't over. Enough." Grant's voice cut like steel, calm but final. "It is over, unless you'd prefer to spend the night in holding." The officers flanked her gently, not aggressive, just weary of the circus. She tried to protest, but her words came out thin, trembling. They walked her down the steps, her eyes meeting mine one last time, full of anger, but underneath it, fear. She had gone too far and she knew it. When her taillights disappeared into the trees, the silence settled back like a blanket. Mark let out a low whistle. "Well," he muttered, "that was a storm if I've ever seen one." Inside, we poured coffee for the three of us. The sheriff leaned back, folder of her nonsense on his knee. "I'll file a full report," he said. "Her behavior crossed into false reporting. If she tries again, we'll have grounds to take further. But for tonight, she's been warned." I nodded, relief mixing with the lingering edge of adrenaline. "She won't let this go easily," I admitted. "No," he agreed, "but you stood your ground without giving her the victory she wanted. Peace sometimes has to be defended." Later, after his truck rumbled down the gravel road, I stepped onto the porch. The stars glittered sharp above, the forest stretched silent and eternal. My cabin stood right where it always had, solid, untouchable mine. Diane had stormed it with fury, but in the end, truth and patience had stood stronger. And here's the thing. Sometimes people mistake control for order, rules for justice. But out here in the quiet, you learn the difference. So, let me throw it to you. What would you have done if Diane showed up at your cabin with cops in tow? Would you have pressed charges? Or do you think letting her walk away was the right move? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I guarantee folks will be divided on this one. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA gone rogue, I definitely want to hear those stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe because trust me, this isn't the last wild showdown I've got to share.